Welcome everyone to Straight Science. Straight Science is a public seminar series put on by University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus in Nome and UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska Sea Grant, also in Nome. It's the home office tonight. Both Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant, we are public servants of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, Yupik, and St. Lawrence Island Yupik peoples. So tonight we're going to be talking about walrus, but this is actually two talks with two presenters. First up is Sarah Hanchett, and she is with the Walrus Marking Tagging Reporting Program. And if you are a beachcomber or a harvester of walruses, native or non-native, you have likely or should interact with the Walrus Harvest Marking and Tagging Reporting Program. And we're going to hear more from Sarah on that. Sarah does have to zip off unexpectedly, and so she'll be taking questions at the end of her presentation. And that'll give us a second for Devin Johnson, who's our second speaker. He's going to be loading up his presentation, and he's going to be talking about a new model that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the authority for management of walruses, and they are looking at how what are some of the models telling us how walrus may fare in the future, given our situation with our ecosystem and environment and whatnot. So that'd be very interesting to hear what the models have to say. With that, I would say welcome, both of you. It's a beautiful, gorgeous night in Nome, sunny and clear as a bell, and has that nice, not too cold, but perfect crispness to it. With that, take it away, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Gay. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my talk. My name is Sarah Hanchett, and I work with the Marine Mammals Management Program for Fish and Wildlife Service. And specifically, I work with the Harvest Monitoring Program called the Marking, Tagging, and Reporting Program. I'm based in Anchorage at the regional office, and I work there for almost 3 years now. I'm originally from Oregon, and I got my start working with threatened fish populations in the Pacific Northwest. I've always enjoyed working with communities that are at the front lines, so to speak, of advocating for and educating people about imperiled species. So this talk will focus on walrus harvest in the Bering Strait region. But before I delve into that, I'll go over a brief overview of the history and implementation of the Marking, Tagging, and Reporting Program. In 1972, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, or MMPA, specified that the Alaska Natives residing on the coast can harvest marine mammals for subsistence and handicraft production. And in addition to this, the Marking, Tagging, Reporting Program, or MTRP, as I'll call it, was created to oversee the harvest and subsequent marking, tagging, and reporting for the native harvest of polar bears, northern sea otters, and Pacific walruses. The program began in 1989 and has recorded data until present day, and it's still ongoing. So the data collected includes biological data and data related to the harvest. And so throughout the over 30 years that this program has been implemented, the structure has remained largely the same. Ooh, got ahead of myself. MTRP employs about a little close to over 100 taggers in about 100 coastal communities. So to record harvest data, MTRP hires local taggers in each of the communities that harvest walrus, sea otter, or polar bears. And these taggers obtain vital information about the hunt, as well as about the animal that's harvested. So within each community, the hunter is responsible for presenting the item to be tagged to the tagger. The image, so this image here on your left is an example of a tagged tusk. The tag is affixed above the gum line so that it does not impede with the carver's ability to carve the ivory. And each tagger is provided with a kit with all the materials needed to record and tag the tusk. This includes a certificate booklet to record information, a drill, and any other materials needed. So this right here is a map that shows the villages in the Bering Strait region. So within this region, we have taggers in Savunga, Gamble, Nome, Little Diomede, Shishmaref, Wales, Brebbing Mission, Teller, King Island, Shaktoolik, and Unalakleet, as well as Elam as well. So some of these taggers have actually been employed with the service for over 30 years. And to highlight someone who's been working with us for over 30 years, our tagger Dean, he has been in Savunga for a long time with the service. And unfortunately, though Dean could not be live to talk about his experience, I did ask him beforehand a few questions that he wanted to include here. So Dean says that he performs a lot of house calls to tag ivory, and he's been doing this since he's been doing this a long time. He's been teaching the youth about the importance of reporting harvest and as well as how the tagging process works. He remembers how captains would wait until the end of spring harvest to distribute tusks among the people after collecting them in gunny sacks. And Dean also discussed how it seems like hunters are traveling farther distances and years with poor ice formation, putting an increasing burden on time and money spent to harvest. And the timing is also changing. In some years, the ice is disappearing faster, the season's beginning earlier, in some cases, it's shorter. So Dean has been a really great asset to the tagging team, and I'm super grateful to work with him and have him impart his knowledge on us. So this picture here on the left is an example of a seal carving that Dean has created, and he's a pretty accomplished carver. So after, I'll go a little bit about, I shouldn't skip too much, there we go, about the biological and harvest information. So after tagging the tusk, the tagger records a series of biological and harvest information. So this includes the sex of the animal, the age, whether it's an adult, subadult, or calf, the tusk length and width, and as well as the harvest location. So in most cases, this is given as a distance and cardinal direction from the village that the hunt origin or the village was hunted from. So another important factor is whether the tusk was obtained via live kill or beach found. And all of this information is recorded on a paper certificate with one copy mailed to us, the service. It's automatically going, okay. One copy mailed to us, one for the hunter, and one for the tagger's records. So after the hunt, the harvest is required to be reported within 30 days. And why is this important? Because after 30 days, it becomes difficult to obtain accurate information. Tusks can be given to someone else who is not familiar with the details, or it can be difficult to recall if you have many tusks that need to be tagged. And getting accurate information, especially the kill location and date, is important when relating these variables to environmental variables, such as sea ice extent. For example, with kill dates and locations, we can see how this has changed over time in relation to sea ice cover. However, if you have tusks that were harvested over 30 days ago, please still tag them, as the information we can get is still quite valuable. So going on to community visits, an important aspect to MTRP is traveling to the communities that harvest. And this is a huge part of MTRP. Traveling to these local communities enables us to engage and learn from taggers, hunters, and members of the community. It's important to remember that dialogue goes two ways, and it's crucial to hear from the people that live in the area so that we can share knowledge. I have been out to St. Lawrence Island and many of the communities in the Bering Strait region quite a few times in the couple of years that I've been here. And I always find it's such a privilege to learn from and talk to people that live in these areas. So how is this information used? After obtaining all this information, we can then use it to inform us about changing conditions and compare current hunting practices with historic data. A project that we're working on now is looking at the relationship between hunt location and sea ice extent for the communities of Gamble and Savunga on St. Lawrence Island. Many hunters have indicated to us that they are traveling farther distances to harvest walrus. This can be a direct impact from the loss of sea ice and change in timing of sea ice formation and retreat. This harvest data can be used to explore this relationship and to determine how changing conditions can continue to impact harvestability in the future. So these are the communities in the Bering Strait region that have reported harvest in the last 10 years. The number of animals harvested are displayed above each bar and are separated according to community. So this is reported harvest between 2013 and then 2022. So among these communities, you can see that Gamble and Savunga make up the bulk of the harvest, and generally it's always over 80%. And you can see that the harvest can be quite dynamic, with some harvest years yielding a number of walrus, followed by years with no reported harvest. This can be a consequence of limited number of people hunting, a lack of walrus available, which is the case in many instances, or in some cases it's harvest that isn't reported. And just want to emphasize that reporting harvest in your community is important because it documents the subsistence way of life, and it confirms that harvest is ongoing and a necessary way of life. So on the next figure, this is the last figure I'll show you guys. As I was mentioning earlier, we are looking at the relationship between distance traveled during the hunt and sea ice over time. So what this is showing is the distance traveled for each walrus harvested for Gamble from 2011 to 2023. So each observation is walrus distance traveled, one walrus harvested. And as you can see, the distances traveled vary from year to year. But at this level, you can't identify a clear trend, at least in the last 10 years for this data. The bulk of the data points lie, the average is like 5 to 25 mile range, but you can see that some of the distances go up to 80 miles. So on the X here, I have it binned into distance categories. So goes all the way from 0 to 1 up to 75 to 100 miles. There's also a large number of NA. So this is harvest data we've been given that does not have a location associated with it. And that's also temporally related as well. So some years we'll have a lot of, for whatever reason, there's some factors that contribute to harvest location not being recorded. So we are continuing to analyze the relationship between hunt distance and location for the harvest data with sea ice cover. And having accurate data from hunters is vital when assessing the relative importance of each and how this can be affected by sea ice conditions in the future. So this brings me to the last topic. How can we use this information to inform population estimates? Devin will speak more to this in just a bit, but generally we can use harvest information to highlight changes in walrus distribution and abundance. So particularly in areas with consistent harvests, changes in the number of animals harvested, including the timing and location, can possibly indicate a change in these variables. This in turn can indicate how sea ice varies from year to year. Additionally, the total harvest can be accounted for when estimating removal from the population. So thank you so much for listening in, and please don't hesitate to contact myself or Brad Benter if you have any questions about tagging, or if you need contact information for your community tagger. And I'll take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that overview of the walrus harvest marking, tagging, and reporting program. I know I've got a couple questions, but anybody out there have a question on marking, tagging, and reporting? Go ahead.
I do. Hi, thank you very much for that presentation. So with the tagging, harvest and tagging in 2013 to 2022, were there tagged walrus tusks from sick walrus or walrus that came to shore, that weren't harvested, but the tusks were taken? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we call them beach found. Yeah.
Beach found, yep. Do they tag those as well?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if it's myself and my colleague Brad work with all of the native people Alaska natives that either harvest or beach find, and then our other division, we have another division that deals with people that are not Alaska native that beach find tusks. But those, beach found is also important just to document that we've found something on the beach. So those are tagged as well. Good question.
Okay, so in the future, that's going to be information that's shared to the public, right? You're going to
absolutely
say these.
Yes. Yep.
Great. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, and where are you from? I'll make sure I've been sending out newsletters to different communities just to give information back to the community. So I want to make sure I get all of them.
Yeah, I'm from Diomede.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And Gay Sheffield has my, I think your contact information just surfaced right down the page earlier. I can take that down and email.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Opik.
Yep.
Anyone? There's a question in the chat from Sue Moore. Do you access information from the sea ice for walrus outlook?
I have not yet, but Devin will be able to speak more to that with this model later.
All right. I think and thank you, Sarah. It was a good overview. I just think it's important to note that it isn't just the harvest of Alaska natives that are part of the walrus harvest monitoring program. And for here being the hub of the Bering Strait region, we do still, so for those who may be online, I think we saw a picture of the black tag that denotes Alaska native, whether beach found or harvest, right? And then for non-native tagging, which would have to be beach found only, that's a different color, a blue tag. And so you should be able to quickly assess, right, what kind of ivory. So Mariskayas or anybody else will know that. You can absolutely, a native to native, sell a raw tusk as long as it has that tag, black tag. You don't want to be, if you're Alaska native, it's not a good thing to have be using a blue tag, because that for non-natives, you've got to stick with that piece of walrus and for the rest of your life, really. I think you can will it to a family member or whoever you will stuff to. So you should never see those blue tagged tusks in circulation, just as a helpful thing there. I know I'm a tagger and have been tagging. I would love to get any of your newsletters. So that would be awesome if I could get on your mailing list as a tagger. And who are the other taggers? There's myself over at Northwest Campus, and who are the other taggers in Nome?
Casey Mendeluk, Ben Payana.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. And Metcalf's, good point. Sea otters and polar bears are also tagged with other taggers. Correct. So right now, if you're a tagger, you can do all three. We don't have sea otters up here, so that's or you could be tagging the hide and skull of the polar bear. So that's another important one for this region. We do have a good subsistence harvest for subsistence purposes of the polar bear. And so those also get a tag. I would assume the same colors, black denoting Alaska.
Yeah,
native.
and the polar bear will get tag
Blue.
on his skull and hide.
Right. And also for that polar bear, very hard to find a beach cast polar bear, but it could be done. And I think non-natives can also, I think the hard parts, right? Bone.
Yeah,
So
that's law enforcement deals with all of that.
Okay, so law enforcement deals with non-native beach casts, but it's a good point Opic brought up about maybe adding those records into your other records from the harvesters, because it may, like Opic says, may tell a story, like there might be something.
Oh yeah,
wrong.
yep. Some communities, there'll just be beach found ivory. There won't be any live killed harvest. Yep.
Yeah. And even from the non-natives, I think reporting would be important
You know,
too,
Gabe,
overall. Yep.
There is a head mount by the helipad that's been sitting there over 30 days. I didn't see a tag on it, but it looks like somebody had maybe, I'm not sure who put it there, how it got there, just sitting there. And yeah, there's no, I can go and take pictures for you if you want. I'm not sure if it was sold to one of the workers here that are, not of Diamond. They're contractors here working, but yeah, I can take a look to see if there's a tag on it. It's got the whole head on there too, Lainey. Hold on. Oh,
okay.
Yep.
So it would be good. I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
I didn't know who to. I'm sorry. I didn't know who to contact on that. Yeah, and I knew Casey was our tagger.
Yes.
Okay, so he's your tagger. All right.
Casey's not our tagger. He's just from Diamond.
Who's the tagger, right? Sarah, for
no,
Diamond?
Casey, he's just recently became a tagger actually.
For Diamond?
For Diamond, yep.
Okay.
And Nome.
Awesome.
For both, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, he's from Diamond anyways.
Yep. He's a great guy, yeah.
He's awesome. Yep.
That helps. And also there's a comment from the chat saying the marking, tagging, reporting program also helps determine the removal rate of walrus from the overall walrus population. So that's good. Oh, this is just me putting my tagging hat on, and I think it just came up in one of the questions, which was reminding me to say it. I was thinking maybe not, but if you ever do renew your form or revise the tagging paperwork form, I would add, because I always try to add it anyway, I would add, there's a lot of questions about, did a walrus have no tusks? Was it young? Or, there's a lot of other parameters there that you're collecting good data for. I would add, was there anything wrong with this walrus or strange about it? Too thin, or, 12 tusks or purple? Because you'd be amazed at all the sort of the natural things that people are noticing. So I would add that, and I would add, was there anything in the stomach? Those are two things I always try to ask and note down on my forms, so that those seem like really might be helpful.
Yeah, that's a
for
really good
everybody
point.
as a record of the health of walruses. And lastly, do you guys, probably not given the times, but are you at all through conferences or anything like that able to make any communications with the Russians regarding their harvest numbers
Not that I'm aware of. Not
or their
what I
beach
do.
cast numbers or
No.
health? Health?
No. No.
Okay. We
I wish
look
wish
forward
things
to,
were different, but nope.
yeah, we look forward to better days there. All right. Thank you so much, Sarah, and good luck on your travels. I know that's unexpected and good
Thank
luck on
you.
all that. You bet. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Devin, I guess you could throw up your first slide.
All righty. Well, yeah, great presentation, Sarah. Let's see if I share my screen correctly.
We did it perfectly before. It's always when the pressure's on. That's when Zoom kind of goes, not tonight. But there you go. There we go. You're on. Perfect.
Nice.
All right, take it away.
All right, so hi everybody. My name is Devin Johnson. I work in the same sort of general department as Sarah for the Fish and Wildlife Service Marine Mammals Management Program. I've been working as a contracted data modeler with them for the past 2 years. Before that, this is actually not my first straight science. I did my PhD work up in Nome with the Peregrine Fund's Gyrfalcon project and gave a couple presentations on that a couple years ago. But now I've pivoted to walrus, and I'll be talking a bit today about a population modeling effort that we've been working on, thinking about how the Pacific walrus population might be affected by climate change and what might happen with simulating what might happen with walruses into the future. And this is a project I've been working on with a couple co-authors from the USGS, Joe Isaguer and Rebecca Taylor, along with Joel Garlick Miller at the Fish and Wildlife Service. Before I get to my modeling effort, I just wanted to give a brief recap of some walrus fieldwork we've been doing. We did this summer. So some of you probably attended the last straight science that had to do with walrus, led by Bill Beatty and Irina Churkanova, where they talked about this genetic mark recapture study that we're doing. And sort of just an update to inform you guys that we were able to complete that field work. I was able to, even though it's not directly related to my modeling effort, I was able to go with them on this walrus research cruise. So we spent about 30 days in June aboard the Norseman 2, this converted grabbing vessel that's now a scientific research vessel. So our port of call was Nome, and we followed the female and juvenile walruses north with the melting ice edge. It's called a genetic mark recapture study. The goal is to gather blubber tissue samples and determine the age sex composition of groups of walruses. And ultimately, those data are used to generate a new population estimate. So yeah, we had a successful field season up there, and we're on track for a new population estimate, and we're planning to go and do it again in 2024. But anyway, back to the model at hand. So Sarah works for the Mark Tagging and Reporting Program, the MTRP, which provides really important information for walrus population dynamics, and specifically how many are harvested in each year. And we're looking at trends in harvest over time. The MTRP and the genetic mark recapture project that we're doing fieldwork for, those both provide really important information about the current status of the walrus population. Our colleague Bill Beatty, in a previous round of this genetic mark recapture work, has recently published a new population estimate of the 95% credible interval is between 160,000 and 364,000 individuals. So The good news is that as it stands currently, we're looking at a really large population of walruses, and all of our data indicate that this population is harvested within a sustainable range. What we don't know is how climate change and anthropogenic stressors, that's human disturbance, will affect the future status of the population. So a couple of years ago, the Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS, and the Eskimo Walrus Commission really identified this need for a modeling framework where we can assess the combined effects of climate change, human disturbance, and subsistence harvest for the walrus population into the future. So we've been working for the past 2 years to build this model. It's still in development, but we're just about to, well, we have submitted a couple manuscripts related to this work. So we're sort of in the late stages of development at this point. I'm just going to give a brief overview of this model tonight. There's certainly a lot of details that I'm not going to go into, but soon you should be able, if you're super curious, you should be able to dig into those manuscripts when they become available to the public. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about the relationship between walruses and sea ice. So walruses are what we call an ice-associated species. They really have evolved with consistent access to sea ice and use it for a lot of their sort of life history strategy. They use it as a platform to rest on between foraging bouts. So the important thing about this is these sea ice platforms are directly above where their preferred food source is. So they're able to make these really short foraging bouts and then go rest on this sort of safe ice-based platform that provides protection from land predators, and it also provides a safe place for the females to give birth. Walruses have this really interesting migration where in the spring, the females and calves will move north with the receding ice edge, while most of the males will go off south and hang out on coastal haulouts in Bristol Bay. But really the females and the calves traditionally, historically, have had year-round access to sea ice. And sort of the problem is that that's changing. So over the past 30 years or so, ice conditions in the Chukchi and Bering Seas have become increasingly unpredictable, and there have been longer ice-free intervals in the summer. This creates a couple problems for walruses. They have fewer places to rest near their food sources, so they spend more energy, more calories, basically, swimming, more time in the water, swimming to their food sources, where they're unable to rest as they once were. And eventually this can have an effect, they're spending more calories to get the same or less food. So this can have an effect on their body condition and juvenile and adult survival rates. We've also noticed over the past 30 years or so that during these ice-free periods, walruses have been congregating at these huge coastal haulouts. Here's a photo of one. I don't know if you see that, but there are about 100,000 walruses all crammed onto that beach there. At these haulouts, they have a much higher risk of mortality from predation. Polar bears can access them on the beaches a lot easier, and disturbance-initiated stampedes. When they're all packed together like that, horses can't see very well, and they can get spooked pretty easily by a plane or a boat going by, dogs, people, drones, etc., polar bears. And it can cause these really big stampedes where everybody rushes to get into the water, and some individuals, often calves, wind up getting trampled to death. So that's not great. This photo I show here is actually a screen cap from a really great documentary. If you're interested in these haulouts, I think it's called Haul Out. If you search Haul Out documentary, it was made by two Russian filmmakers, and it was just nominated for an Oscar last year, actually, for short documentary. But if you haven't seen that yet, I would highly recommend it. It sort of poses this problem really well and has some really amazing imagery. So in the Chukchi and Bering Seas, we are pretty aware that both the consistency and basically sea ice is becoming a lot more unpredictable, and there have been longer ice-free periods, and generally there's less of it than there has been in the past. In this model, we're using these global climate projections that are developed by these big groups of international climate scientists to project onto the Chukchi and Bering Sea what we think the future of sea ice is going to be into the future. And we're projecting forward to, we have a time step at 2050 and one at 2100. So in this model that we're talking about, it's sort of built to go up to the end of the 21st century, which is how far the sea ice data goes. But basically, in this figure here, it's a bit tricky to see. The resolution is really bad, but the white on this figure is actually land. We're looking at Russia and Alaska in the Bering Chukchi Sea here. Yeah, thank you, Gabe, for that link. Blue is water and red is ice, and sort of pink and less dark red are just different concentrations of ice. On the left, we're looking at the maximum ice extent on April 1st. And on the right, we're looking at the minimum extent on October 1st. So winter ice versus summer ice extent. Here we're looking at 2015, which is sort of our baseline sort of contemporary estimate, sort of similar to what we would experience right now. And we see that in the winter, the ice goes down through to the Bering Sea, whereas in the summer, at its minimum extent, it's a bit off the coast of Alaska. These global climate models that we're using, now we're looking at projections for 2050. So here on the left, we can compare it to, so 2050 here and 2015 above it. In the winter, the maximum ice extent moves a little further north, and the minimum extent moves a lot further north, and there's a lot longer of an ice-free period in the summer. When we look forward to 2100, we see much larger changes. We see basically an ice-free Bering Sea in the winter. This climate scenario that we're looking at here suggests that there will no longer be ice in all through the Bering Sea by the year 2100. And in the summer, a really long ice-free interval over 6 months. So take-home message here is that we are currently experiencing changes, but we're expecting to see much larger changes to sea ice over time. So I'm just going to go over a couple of the future stressors that we've identified for walruses looking forward into the future. As I mentioned, two of the main things I've already briefly talked about. As sea ice becomes less available, walruses are going to have a higher energy requirement to migrate and find food. They're going to basically burn more calories, spend more time swimming in the water to migrate and find their food. There's also going to be that increased risk of mortality at these super crowded coastal haulouts. Also, as the ice goes away, we're expecting, we almost know for sure that there's going to be an increased human footprint in the Arctic. We're already seeing a lot more trans-Arctic shipping, these new shipping lanes being created. We may see more energy development and commercial fishing. So these human disturbance factors for walruses, they pose a threat to disturbing their foraging time and their migration routes. We're also expecting that we may see changes to the distribution of benthic invertebrates, walrus food, and other species as well. Maybe new predators will move into the region. There's some concern about orcas in recent years. So thinking about those stressors, we've developed this model. It's called a population consequence of disturbance model. This is a new, it's been developed in the past 10 years or so, and applied, this sort of framework has been applied to other marine mammals, mostly whales, but where we've basically taken this general framework idea and adapted it for walruses. Very generally, what we do is create a bioenergetic model where we're simulating the female walrus's daily energy balance over the course of her life. So basically, we're cramming in into this model, into this series of equations. We're cramming in basically everything we know about walrus population dynamics, physiology, and behavior from the scientific literature, along with indigenous knowledge, to sort of create this energy budget, daily inputs and outputs for individual walruses, computerized walruses. And then by running that hundreds of thousands of times, we're able to get some estimates about what may happen to the population as a whole. In the model, we're able to relate energy use and mortality to the amount of sea ice walruses have available, along with the amount of human disturbance they encounter. So using that, we can build climate change and human disturbance scenarios to predict what might happen to the walrus population into the future. So very basically, at its core, this is what the model is doing. It's every day it estimates how much food a walrus gets, that's its energy in, versus its energy out via movement, metabolism, or pregnancy, or feeding a calf. And there are all these probabilities associated with what its activity budget would be based on its sea ice availability, based on its location, movement patterns, etc. But basically, it's balancing energy in versus energy out and determining every day whether the calf or the adult will survive to the next day. And again, this is based on a whole lot of physiological information, both from the Western science literature and from some indigenous knowledge workshops that we've done. This is kind of a complicated figure, but I think it's interesting once we unpack it a little bit. This is showing the model output for one example individual over the course of its life. Here on the top, we're looking at the female, so the adult female walrus, their mass in kilograms from age 2 to age 32 when this one died. On the bottom, we're looking at calf mass in kilograms. Red lines are reproductive failures and green lines are reproductive successes. So basically we see, this simulation starts when the walrus is 2 years old, when it's basically no longer considered a calf, it's an adult walrus. We see it grow over time up to a certain threshold where it's able to start trying to reproduce. Each of these spikes is a reproductive attempt as the walrus gains and then loses a lot of mass as it tries to successfully reproduce. This one had a couple calf starvation mortalities and background mortalities before it was finally able to raise a calf at 16 years old. From this, for this one individual within the model, we're able to get some parameters like a life expectancy, the number of calves it produced and the number of calves that survived, ultimately to get an estimate of reproduction for this one individual. So you can imagine that the model could and does simulate thousands or 100,000 individuals to ultimately get estimates of things like reproduction and other population dynamics at the population level. So the idea is that we can use that model to and calibrate it to survival estimates and reproductive estimates that match what we think is happening to the population right now as a baseline. And then we can expose them to different conditions to estimate what might happen under those conditions in the future. So in the model, the amount of ice that walruses have nearby has an effect on their energy use and the probability that they need to rest at a coastal haulout. So when they have less sea ice available to them, walruses spend more time each day swimming to reach their foraging grounds and spend less time resting and burn more calories. This is all happening in the model. We can also estimate each day they spend at a coastal haulout, depending on how much ice they have available to them. And each day they spend resting at a coastal haulout rather than ice, they have a higher risk of mortality. So using these two things, we're able to incorporate these global sea ice models that predict ice conditions to the end of the 21st century, sort of to see how the energetic effect on walruses under these different climate scenarios. In addition to the climate scenarios, we also have a mechanism for incorporating disturbance scenarios. We're wondering how things like energy development in fisheries and commercial shipping lanes might affect the walrus population into the future. So in the model, we can basically have different levels of human disturbance factors incorporated into it. On a day when a walrus is disturbed, it basically loses an amount of potential gained energy by being disturbed. So you can think like 30% of its foraging effort that day might be lost because it got spooked by a ship or something. So that's sort of our mechanism for incorporating these disturbance scenarios. So we have both climate and disturbance scenarios that we can look at within this framework. Basically, we're able to combine different variations and permutations of those two scenarios to create these overall, I call them combined scenarios, that look at the combined effects of different sea ice conditions and different human disturbance conditions on the walrus population to simulate what the population trend may be under those conditions. In the current version of the manuscripts and the model, we have this organized into 4 different scenarios ranging from optimistic to pessimistic. And we're incorporating 2 different global climate change scenarios, which depend on the amount of carbon that's introduced into the atmosphere in the future. We're looking at both an optimistic and pessimistic global climate change scenario as well. We don't need to get into the details of what this says, but just know that via this mechanism, we're able to combine both climate and disturbance into this range of scenarios that sort of encompasses the full range of things that we think might happen in the future. So we've been working on this model over the past 1.5 years or so. It's been a collaborative effort truly between the Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS, and members of the Eskimo Walrus Commission. We've had Indigenous partners and members of the Eskimo Walrus Commission on a steering committee sort of driving the development of the model. And although the model uses the best available scientific data, we also identified information gaps that we have that are best addressed by knowledgeable walrus hunters. Walrus are still a pretty understudied species, and we fully recognize that we don't know everything. And yeah, people who are out there on the land and experience walruses firsthand have a lot more information than we do. So in August 2023, a couple of months ago now, we held a 3-day workshop in Nome with a panel of experienced walrus hunters from Gamble and Savunga to facilitate the co-production of knowledge for the model. And these indigenous knowledge holders provided input on various aspects of the framework, including walrus biology and behavior, different climate stressors that they think will be important in the future, and potential future scenarios that were really important to the model's development. So it's truly been a collaborative process, with multiple partners. Our preliminary takeaways so far from this modeling effort, we constructed and assessed 4 combined climate disturbance scenarios, ranging from optimistic to pessimistic, for what conditions we think may influence the Pacific walrus population to the end of the 21st century. All of our scenarios indicated declines to the population over time. We know that the ice is going to become less available to walruses. We're talking to the end of the 21st century, almost 70 years from now. So yeah, the take-home message here is that we are expecting to see declines to the population into the future. The severity of these declines, our most optimistic scenario suggested maybe 10% of the population maybe gone by 2100, and the most pessimistic said that maybe 50% will. So these aren't necessarily catastrophic changes, but they're definitely significant. We were able to determine that the severity of these declines was really most heavily influenced by sea ice availability. Subsistence harvest, comparatively, was really a minor factor influencing these population dynamics. And the model indicates we also have a separate harvest sustainability assessment model that sort of builds off of this model, where we assess different harvest strategies into the future. I don't have time to talk about it today, but we are developing a manuscript specifically about this harvest assessment model as well. And that model indicates that current harvest rates will actually continue to be sustainable into the future, even as the population declines under the scenarios that we assessed. All right, I think that's all I have. I know that was a lot of information, so I'm happy to take any questions.
That was. Thank you very much, Devin. So at this point, while you're thinking of your questions, I know Sarah had to leave, but this is always a good time for our Straight Science audience to show a little love for Sarah and Devin in the chat box. It is really never easy to be a public speaker, especially Devin. You did a very nice job of delivering what I sort of take home as the story you expect, sort of, but you're the one giving the message, and so you did a really nice job of that. So you can put kudos in the chat for Sarah and Devin if so inclined. Any questions at this point? I think your co-production of knowledge, I'm sure that was an Eskimo Walrus Commission, Fish and Wildlife Service, probably U.S. Geological Survey. That's the arm of the federal government that does research, all coming together. I think that's brilliant and a really great addition to the knowledge base. I don't know what was discussed, but I'm sure it was very interesting and eye-opening to everyone. With that, when are you coming back? Are you going to be, we've got the marking, tagging, reporting program, and then you mentioned something 2024, there is the there was another one of the cruises. Will that be out of Nome again?
Yep. Yeah. And so that project is led by Bill Beatty at the USGS, who's here, and Irina Turkanova, who's my colleague at the Fish and Wildlife Service. But yes,
Okay.
the plan is for for that work to continue in 2024, be based out of Nome again.
And do you know when that roughly is? Or I'll guess I'll give fair warning to Bill Beatty. I'm going to give you a call. So when you are coming to Nome, maybe we can get a straight science so we know that you're shoving off and the good work you're about to do for walruses in the region and beyond. You can unmute Bill Beatty if you want
Yeah,
to.
absolutely. Can't put my camera on because I'm in pajamas here in Wisconsin, but
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. The tentative dates are right now are May 31st to June 28th, plus or minus a few days, depending on how things shake out. But yeah, we'd love to do another talk this spring and kind of update everybody on how things went last year and where we're headed. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Great. Yeah, great presentation, Devin.
It was. On your thoughts of the increased ship traffic in the region, that is something that this year we seem to be really seeing the increase in the northern sea route, whether the sheer number, and then the variety of industrial maritime traffic using the northern sea route through the Bering Strait has been phenomenal. I think if somebody, I don't know if you guys are keeping track of the numbers, but I'm sure this has got to be a record breaker. Everything from commercial fishing vessels, fishing in the Chukchi, drill ships. We've had several military exercises in the region, so forth and so on. I didn't hear the possibility of ship strikes. Is that in your model, as these vessels are now going to be going nonstop? I believe Rootin' Tootin' Putin said that in 2024, they are those ARC 7 ice capable 1,000-foot LNG tankers are going to continue starting in 2024, which is just a few weeks away, honestly, months away. Do you have anything in your model on ship strikes?
Yeah, so that's one aspect of the model that we're still trying to wrap our heads around. How can we really predict the level of ship traffic?
Yeah,
many years from now. We can we can throw numbers in there and see what happens. But yes, to your answer, we there's really not very much data out there about direct strikes on walruses from ships. We know it could theoretically happen, probably at a very low percentage. But yeah, there is actually a parameter in the model, very low percentage chance that when a walrus is exposed to a vessel, that it just dies from a strike. The primary aspect of the shipping disturbance thing is its reduction in the amount of food it gets that day. But there is that very small percentage that it could get struck as well. That's something we're thinking about.
Yeah, I lose sleep, honestly. These vessels this summer, those 1,000-foot LNG tankers are southbound, bucking the current, northbound through the Bering Strait, doing over 17 knots. In ice, in February, we know these ships are doing 12 knots. And I kind of think of the one time we have not had, unless it's been military and their AIS has been turned off, though the 2 months we have not had any large vessel traffic has been March and April. And, I've always been thankful for that. But as we get going with ice reduction, I think this year might be an interesting year. Maybe it would be helpful if people do see injuries, unusual injury to walruses this spring or from now forward. You might want to request that pictures or anything, untowards that looks damaging. The same thing for our large cetaceans that are going to be jammed up in this strait as well. We're trying to get the thought out about if you see broken jaws or those kind of things that might indicate. Just saying, I know there probably isn't much data because there hasn't been this scenario before, right? Where you have large ship traffic. And so we're kind of all going into this together going, well, here we are. So thanks.
Do
Go
we
ahead, Opik.
do we know? I know the coastal communities, they're very, very knowledgeable about walrus and migration, and also following the changes, we've been living around every day, climate change and warming oceans, warmer oceans. And, we can see it really well here that our ice condition is always so bad now. Our hunting is never good like it used to be. So we do know that these walrus are, being impacted just like the rest of the other communities. We know that, but how can we help the walrus, right? Can't really, not with increased shipping, because how many ships have already gone on the west side this year? So many. I mean, I can see, yeah, there's vessels going across on the east side, not as much as the Russians are. There's so much traffic right there already, gay, that, the walrus over there. So I worry about that. I think the only way I see it is to minimize shipping, but that's not going to happen, ever.
Yeah, one of the things we're thinking about is there are specific areas that high use areas. You may have heard of Hannah Shoal is one where a higher percentage of walruses congregate. It's a sort of an important habitat use area for walruses. And there are also pretty discrete shipping lanes that vessels have to stick to. So
the vessels, you're saying that the vessels are where?
They are, and a sort of a goal of our department is to work with, or a potential goal of our department is to work with the people who designate these shipping routes and try to make sure that they're not crossing these sort of sensitive habitat areas. So that's something that we can potentially do to reduce vessel walrus interaction, but something we're thinking about.
With vessel increase, there's lots of noise, lots of pollution by the ship, lots of pollution by us people. We're bringing the decline of walrus down. Human choice, and we're causing climate change to occur and continue. We're not going backwards. It's just, yeah. And then your slide with the walrus without sea ice, that slide you posted, and you had you said you didn't have an answer to it, and then you produced a photo of a haul out. Looks like the photo, the Russian haul out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like a Russian photo with all those walrus in there.
Yeah.
But then you were saying that, you just mentioned briefly that you didn't know. How did you stress that? Walrus without sea ice. What did you mention about that? You didn't know? You didn't have an answer for that, or no one will have an answer for it? Well, I forgot what I didn't hear quite what you said. My daughter was trying to question me too. It's that slide where where there's the walrus without sea ice, and you brought something, you stressed something in there that caught my ear.
Yeah, let's go back to it.
And then after that, no, it's good, Opik. And when you get your question answered, we'll head for the chat box because there's some questions there too. While Devin's getting lined up. It's good. Good.
Yep.
Sure. We have lots of time to make sure get an answer. It's important.
During that slide, I could share it again too if you want. But I was basically just mentioning that yes, walruses are, when there's no sea ice available, we've been noticing over the past 30 years or so these massive
Holland.
coastal haulouts. Yeah, that one in Russia at Cape Sarastikamen they've been estimated at over 100,000 on the beach at one time, which is a significant portion of the population. So
Okay.
really jam-packed in there. So
I think you sharing that's great, because I think you already found an answer in your own question. It's where the disturbance of the walrus and, their habitat, their lifestyle, where that's what we're doing. The increased shipping, the warmer oceans, the animals getting sick because of the phytoplankton, that kind of thing.
yeah.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, thank you.
So one more question before they grab one from the chat box.
Yep.
Are communities how involved are they with increased shipping knowledge in the coastal communities? How are they addressing concern about that from these villages? If their traditional hunting lifestyle is walrus, seals, the ocean.
So are you
Are
asking?
they raising concerns with
Go
the
ahead.
increased shipping and how it's impacting their hunting in the spring seasons, probably fall seasons? I'm not sure if the communities have raised like these. They're noticing because of the shipping, increased shipping, like in the springtime is when we catch our walrus. Well, used to, that they're not seeing as many, because of the shipping.
Yeah. During our so we had a we call it an Indigenous Knowledge Workshop a couple of months ago with participants from Gamble and Savunga, and we talked a lot about this. Shipping is a increased shipping is a really big concern for these communities, and they shared stories about how one ship nearby can divert the entire sort of migration pathway for the walruses in the spring and sort of delay their arrival by a week or two. So yeah, it's it's really important and something we're thinking about. There is a these commercial shipping lanes do have rules, and there is like a buffer zone around some islands within the Bering Strait, including St. Lawrence Island and the Diomedes, I think. So yeah, that's one way that at least the sort of the shipping companies can one of the ways that these communities can influence what the shipping companies are able to do.
Industrial maritime traffic, not just shipping companies, right?
Right.
I mean, it's fishing and cruise ships and research vessels, military vessels, and so forth.
Yep, takers, everything, even from the foreign side, coming from way the heck over there to down.
Even that giant oil platform
Mhm.
that swinged by.
Mhm.
All right. Are you good, Opik?
Yep, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for your questions, Opik, and thank you, Devin, for your responding. There's a question in the chat from Sue Moore. What is the spatial and temporal scale of the sea ice metrics used in the model? That is, can you account for less than 15% ice cover?
Yeah. So the models we used were from a suite of these global climate models that the climate scientists have developed over the past several years. Let's see if I get this right. They have recently published a new suite of models called the CMIP6 suite, but within that, I showed that map with sort of the broad resolution. Each of those hexes, they they estimate a percent ice cover on each day. So we have sort of an averaging algorithm across these sort of 10 sea ice models that we're looking at to generate that data for across the Bering Sea. So we're looking at daily data that can go below 15% ice cover.
Did that get you the answer, Sue, you're looking for? We'll take that as a yes. There's a comment from Gavin Brady. Excellent, though depressing talk. Devin, that was, thank you. So I think everyone thanks you. It's tough to be the messenger. Apologies for my ignorance. What is meant by calf background mortalities versus starvation and haul out mortalities?
Yeah.
What's meant? Okay.
So in that figure I showed, we had that example individual with successful and unsuccessful reproductive attempts, and I labeled a couple of them starvation mortalities. Those were mortalities where the simulated calf didn't get enough food and died as a direct result of that. It had something called a calf haul out mortality, where the model determined that we have basically the longer walruses spend at a coastal haul out, the higher probability of mortality they have from stampedes, as we mentioned. So within the model, we have parameters for that, and we're able to see which simulated calves die at a haul out because of those stampedes. So that was the calf haul out mortality. And then each animal that we simulate has a life expectancy that's drawn from a probability, and there's a chance that a calf just has a short life expectancy. So these background mortalities would be basically any other thing that can kill a calf other than starvation or death at a haul out from stampedes. It could be it could be harvest, or it could be a predator or disease, or really any other thing.
Could you partner with like a marine biologist to accompany you on your research to collect samples, from the walrus or the dead walrus? I'm not sure where that fits, but when you're doing your research, no, never mind. I was just thinking, because you don't have any answers for animals that are already dead. I mean, you don't have answers as to why they're, Lainey, stop, why they are why they're dead. I think you would find the answer if you were to collect samples and get them tested, otherwise photo document, that kind of thing.
So
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I can help step in, one, Gavin says, thank you, you answered his question. And two, I think OPIC brings up a good point. And correct me if I'm wrong here, OPIC, but they're looking at, mortality, and it's better to understand when we find dead walrus floaters and dead walrus beach cast and things like that, what actually killed them. Or if you were a harvester and you had, like what I mentioned, on the form for tagging your tusk, was there something wrong? There might start to be I don't know, maybe you'd get more or less. I don't know, but is that the kind of thing, OPIC, where we're looking for answers as to what is actually killing a walrus? Because we know that walruses that are harvested are killed by a bullet, but what about the other ones? What story can they tell?
Mm-hmm. Getting the story.
Yeah.
Getting a story.
Am I hitting it there? You're looking for.
Yep.
Okay.
I was using a lot of English words the wrong way.
No, all good. I'm following you. I'm with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is, for our department, it is really important to get that information, when people come across a walrus and take photos, where we're able to sometimes, determine what killed it. We also Point Lay has a pretty consistent large coastal haul out every year, right off the native village of Point Lay. And in the past, we've actually done surveys out there where we've encountered carcasses and taken samples from them and taken a lot of photos and sort of done like a necropsy report to try to figure out what was the cause of death for those individuals.
Did
So,
you have to have a permit to collect the samples, or did you have a tribal member accompany you?
We did. I wasn't a part of that effort, but I'm sure they had permits.
Plus, OPIC, they are the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so they kind of don't really need a permit since they issue permits. They kind of are covered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I can chime in really quickly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fish and
Bill,
Wildlife
help me
Service
out
and
there.
Fish and Wildlife Service and USGS both, we do get permits from a different
Okay.
group of Fish and Wildlife Service people for that sort of activity. Yep. So yeah.
Okay.
All right, there was a comment from the Metcalfs. The Eskimo Walrus Commission is looking forward to a model this presentation to the participants and commission members, and I think that will be an awesome presentation that Devin's going to give. I have two last things. If anyone else has a question, one is that there was a fella named Bud Fay and another fella named Matthew Aya. And I don't know if those names resonate in your head. Do either of those names resonate?
Bud Fay certainly does.
Bud
Yeah.
Fay. Okay. And there's a gentleman from originally St. Lawrence Island named Matthew Aya. And they often, there were these meetings that occurred in 1989, 1990, which seems like 100 million years ago. And probably were, but they were called the Walrus International Technical Symposium, lovingly known as WITS, W-I-T-S. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Okay.
I've only been doing walrus stuff for the past 2 years. I'm
Oh, that's
sure.
right. Deer Falcons were there. Okay. This may be helpful to you. It just came into my head. So the WITS, there's not going to be a computer. It's going to be a read it. You have to find it in the library and read it. There's reports. Probably the Eskimo Walrus Commission has it as well. And I may have one in a file cabinet somewhere. The WITS was that was Bud Fay and I remember Matthew Aya would be there, and they would bring in everyone from Russia, from Canada, that was walrus research. And there would be whole discussions whether or not they thought they saw a breeding walrus. You know, it was fascinating because everybody was talking, sharing story. It wasn't like so technical, although it was called the Walrus International Technical Symposium. And one of the things, I was very young, much younger at the time, was they had these black and white photos taken from large aircraft that were coming from the Russian side. And they were these haul outs of like 100,000 animals. And they would say, you know, this was, I don't know, 3 miles of walrus, right? And they were trying to start counting the walrus, and there was a lot of FEDASAF was part of that. They were trying to figure out when to count walrus, what's the best way to count walrus, very difficult. But I remember these groups from the, you know, the Gulf of Onondaga, Meech and Spit, and some of the other places where ice free, and they had these massive haul out events. And I remember that, and I just wonder, you may want to make sure you are getting that data, because I think these phenomenal haul outs that we're seeing may not be so novel, right? There was something that walrus were doing, and they would tape the 8x10 photos down the hall, you know, so you could walk past that, you know, we didn't have all the technology. So you could walk past all these, you know, 12 8x10 photographs taken from a height, and you could see all that. And so I encourage you to maybe go back in the non-digital literature, and the first one, especially the Walrus International Technical, there may be some information in some of those what I guess now is gray literature that might be very, very helpful to you regarding these large haul out events, especially in ice-free waters of places like the Bering Strait west and then north shore of the Gulf of Anadyr, if that's helpful. I just wanted to call that out. The other thing, not to end on a depressing note, but the other thing that is also ship strikes may be something that we don't have a lot of information on, but we should be thinking about as we go forward, looking for that evidence, because now this is novel. The other thing is, right before the Ukraine situation sort of sliced communications or stopped communications between the two sides of the Bering Strait, I was getting photographs and even TikTok video of walruses, bull walruses, Pacific walruses that were in the cod, coming out the cod end of a trawl net on a commercial fishing vessel. I don't know how much of that you guys get, but that would be another one where we could be sampling or something. If we find dead animals on the beach, did it drown? And that's not a difficult test to know. If you can get in on the lung, you can do a pretty quick test of whether the animal drowned or not. So I don't know if those kind of things are of interest, but know that commercial fishing we have seen as it's moving north into the Chukchi, as it's moving into the northern Gulf of Anadyr during those summer months when you have large haul outs. It seems like there's a new issue with a different kind of bycatch, if that's helpful to you.
Yeah, I've seen the bycatch reports, and yeah,
Russian?
Yes, I think it was just a couple individuals. I'm
Okay.
fairly sure, but
Well, I'm glad you're getting them.
It's definitely something we're thinking about with regards to this framework. Both disturbance and direct bycatch from commercial fisheries.
Right.
But yeah, that WITS data sounds really interesting. I'll see if I can dig anything up about it. But
yeah, and it might be like when you arrive here, I don't know, it may be in a filing cabinet at the Eskimo Walrus Commission. I'm sure that the university probably has a copy, because that's where Bud Fay, all his reports went to. So anyway, thank you all. If no more questions, don't want to hold us up. Thank you, Devin. I'm getting off down a wormhole. So next week at this time, Thursday the 9th, we're going to have Dwayne Stevenson and the NOAA Race Division. They're going to be giving us the first public results of the 2023 Northern Bering Sea Bottom Trawl Survey. So that's a big one for the region. That's a big one for the walrus biologists as well. So Devin, I'm sure hopefully we'll see you back, Bill Beatty, and Sarah, I'm sure, and I see Rebecca. So that'll be next Thursday. I'll be sending the invitations out for that pretty quick. With that, thank you all so much. Thank you, Devin and Sarah. I hope she's on a plane safe and sound on her way to where she needs to be. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, Gabe.